As soon as I get a new version, I check my preferences because I like mine set up a particular way. Now, just because I set mine up some way doesn't mean that you have to set it up the same way, but I do want to show you some of the things that I'm very particular with as far as my preferences. So you can find your preferences under Edit, Preferences, and then you can go to Control K to bring them up, but I'm just going to go into the General Preferences because that will allow you to get to everything. Now you'll see that it says Show Tooltips. Now you may get annoyed by having those show tools, that's a tough one to say, Show Tooltips checked, but I have mine checked because I am an instructor and I do teach and I show people what happens when you roll over something. So I normally have that checked. The next thing that I do like to have checked for sure is the Allow Floating Documents in Expert Mode, and that allows me to move and float my photos. Like if I have 2 or 3 of them up at one time, I like to be able to float my photos around. So I'll show you what that means in a few seconds. The other thing I like to do is, let's see here, zoom with scroll wheel. Scroll wheel. I cannot talk today. But that is really a necessity for me because I like to zoom in really fast into certain areas, and I do have a scroll wheel on my mouse, so I do use that. Now if you use like a Wacom tablet, then you may not need to set that, but I strongly advise that if you do use a mouse and you have a scroll wheel that you set that. And then these other ones I go ahead and check because they are default, so I go ahead and keep them that way. Saving files, I go ahead and keep that save as to original folder so that it goes into the folder that I was working with. And I don't really mess around with this, but if you need to in the future, you can do that. Performance, this is where if like you're having some problems with your RAM, which you probably won't, but if you do, you can go in here and you can kind of move things around, and you don't have to have so much of the history states, which is 50 right here, because having a ton is going to also hog up a little bit of your RAM. So if you're having problems, you might want to lower the history states. I usually keep everything as default until I have issues. So I've never had issues before, but just know that it is there. As far as the display and cursors go, I normally don't touch these either, but sometimes you will, on a mistake, you might do something like this. You might change it when you don't even know it, and it changes your cursor. So the standard looks like this for other cursors, and then this one here. So toggling between those, you can try it out, see which one you like the best. I normally like to use normal brush tip because when I'm working with different brush sizes, it will show you exactly what size that's going to be. But if you like to work with precise, you can do that, or you can do the standard, which I don't really normally like too much, so I like the normal brush tip. All right. Transparency, I like to keep it at the grays and whites, but you can change it here if you want to. Rulers and units, I like to work in inches. I like the type to be points, and I like the print sizes to be in inches. If you want to change that, you can do that as well. I like the print resolution to be set at 300, screen resolution at 72. Guides and grids, I don't mind my color being this cyan color, but if you wanted to change it to a light red, you can do that, or whatever you want. This is when we'll be talking about the guides and grids here in a little bit, but that's where you would change it. Plugins, I don't mess with. Adobe Partner Services, I don't mess with. Application, I don't mess with. And type, I usually keep it at the default. Okay, let's go back up to General. The most important things I do check is the zoom with scroll, and then I show my tooltips. Okay. So that is what the preferences box is all about. Now, I was telling you about floating boxes, so let's bring in another photo real quick so I can show you what that means. So right here, you'll notice that I have, these are called floating boxes. If I did not have that checked, it would go something like, let's go in there and uncheck it. Allow floating boxes in the expert mode. Okay, it would go something like that. They would be hooked together. I don't really like that because I like to see them at the same time. So that is one reason why I go in to my preferences and I change it to allow floating boxes. And now I can pull them apart and they can float, because it then does allow me to take this, and maybe if I wanted to move this into that, excuse me, then I can go ahead and easily do that. All right, and then if I want to close out, I can close out of that photo, and then I have a photo within a photo. So another thing too is if you do have a couple of these open at the same time, you'll notice here it says window. And did I not open that one up? Maybe I didn't. Let's go ahead and open it up again. Let's open up this one. There we go. And then I can go to window and I can do images and I can tile them, so they'll tile. I can go back to window and images and cascade them. I can go to window and images and float all in windows, and so on and so forth. Consolidate to tabs, then it's like this. So you can kind of play around with your window and how your photos are going to look. And that's in window, images, and then the top 5 different options you have available.